So this is our 410 project video. Our team name was UltimateTeam, and the members were Radhir, Kothuri, Arnav, Mishra, me, Katyayni, Gupta, and Samir, Chaudhry. So the idea behind our project was basically, it's based off soccer players, football in Europe. And so we're basically tracking different soccer player career statistics. And the idea behind it is that it's an easy way for people to use this, to interact with some sort of UI that allows them to learn about players, view their players, search for players based on different attributes, whether it's like red cards, yellow cards, or based on like how many shots they take, things like that. They can also simulate games between different teams that are currently like active, even across different leagues, and so that gives an opportunity to kind of see, who would win this game. If you're kind of curious, if you're like maybe placing bets or something like that. You can also build your own team, so kind of like how fantasy football or fantasy sports in general work. You're able to do this with soccer with our program, where you can choose specific players that you want to put onto your team. You can choose your favorite players. You just have to make sure you have someone from each type. And then there's the recommender system, which allows you to determine the best players to draft. And you can even simulate games for these custom teams that you build. So just kind of about the usefulness of this entire project. So the idea actually kind of comes around as we are college students, and it's very relevant to us. So a lot of us are major soccer enthusiasts, and we don't really have the time to actively follow all these different leagues that there are because we have school and homework and things like that. So because of that, this allows us to see who the best players are. If we're playing fantasy soccer or something like that, it'll give us a quick rundown of what's relevant and get us a better understanding of how the teams are doing. It'll also tell us about like past seasons and let us know like, what happened last year, what happened 2 years ago, what are the statistics looking like. So why is this cool? Why is this different? So there are like fantasy football leagues and things like that, and fantasy soccer leagues essentially that allow you to kind of know about what these simulations kind of might look like at a high level. But we actually are able to extrapolate this data across all the different years and run these models and really understand what it's looking like this year based on how it's looked in the past. And it also gives us like better recommendations of what these players are. We don't really have recommender systems built into any of the other programs. Because otherwise you have to go to a third party and find out, what are these recommendations? What's the best player to draft? You can't find that out on your own regularly.
So to find current and legacy data about soccer players and teams and across the various leagues, we use some technologies such as Beautiful Soup and Selenium. We use Selenium to scrape some dynamic data whenever the data was loaded on the website dynamically. And our primary source was WhoScored.com. It was basically the go-to website to get everything soccer related and all the data that we needed for the players and the leagues.
We had a couple of Python scripts that we wrote as well for some algorithms that we needed to use for the project. So one of these was the algorithm to simulate who would win a game. So this actually took into account pretty much all the different statistics we could take from WhoScored. We added the match ratings to see what players were really strong. We looked at red and yellow cards to see if would there be a lot of fouls, would this team lose out a lot of players because to cards. We looked at the different shots they took and the goals they scored. How many times they saved the ball, how many times they won an aerial battle, how many times they, just all passer ratings, all these different statistics that we had in order to determine, what would be the score that we would look at. And on the other side, we also needed an algorithm to recommend players when we were building these teams. And so we used these exact same statistics that we had from WhoScored, but in a different manner, just to see if you have a really strong keeper already, you don't need another keeper, or you might need a backup keeper, something like that. So who is realistically going to be part of your team? And also looking at things like, you speak the same language, you're the same nationality, or you're from the same league, kind of the way that league plays. So those are ways to determine, this player might be a fit for you. We can't really deal personalities, but we did everything we could with the data that we did have.
Finally, we used all the data we gathered in the algorithms and built that into REST API using Django REST framework. And then we finally had an Angular front end using AngularJS to combine the various features so that we could have a front end to display all the back end features that we built in. This was a very key feature, especially with our team, because this allowed the two teams to work independently while the Django team focused on building these algorithms and these advanced features that we could work separately and build a REST API, and then we contact the front-end team to build the front-end and use AngularJS to interact with their back-end REST API.
So, in regards to evaluating how the system works right now, it's fully functional, everything's working fine. All the different things we were talking about earlier, from drafting to simulating to recommending, all that stuff is already implemented. But there are some areas we want to improve. That includes when we're, as I was mentioning earlier on, with the recommender system, we can't take into account certain features, whether it's personalities to, salaries. It costs a lot of money to draft someone like Messi. If you want to get him on your team, so you can't really just take all these really good players because every team has a salary cap. To make it legitimate, you'd have to do something more than that. On the flip side, I mean, with simulating teams, it's very heavily based on information about the scoring potential and the goalie blocks. However, you can't really use the data always in that manner. For example, if a team is really good in the MLS, which is the American Soccer League, it wouldn't necessarily mean they'd be good in the European League because the MLS is often considered lower tier to the European leagues. We do have some simulations, screenshots, and other screenshots about the work that we did in the next few slides.
Yeah, so like we mentioned before, here's a screenshot showing all the legacy data that we collected about players. So once we collected all the data and scraped all the data from qscore.com using our Python scripts, we piped that into a PostgreSQL database like we mentioned, and we're displaying it on the front end in the AngularJS website.
Something to notice is that the skills that they only receive a skill if they're really good. So like 1 year, Jonathan was really good at defending and had a lot of man in the match. That's why he got the defender skills.
So now we're gonna showcase one of our advanced features, which is match simulation. So if we go over to here, here's our actual website. We can log in as a user. So as you can see, we've logged into our kind of the dashboard for the user, and here's some features on the side that they can potentially use. So if you go to the match simulator feature, we can pick one of the teams that we're looking for. So here's all the teams that we've scraped, along with some custom teams that users can create, kind of add their fantasy teams as well, and see how their fantasy team would fare against other actual teams or other fantasy teams as well. So we can pick Barcelona and pick another team. Madrid, and see if you simulate a match, you can see on the bottom that Real Madrid beats Barcelona with a score of 4-0, and you can actually see which players on which teams scored those goals. So that's one of our advanced features right there.
So if we were to simulate again the second time, you'd actually see that based on the data, it actually does change up, just depending on, it takes in some randomization features based on tiredness and seasons and how it's running. So now this time Real Madrid won again because they're still the better team, but they only scored 2-1 this time.
So the second advanced feature that we mentioned before was the recommendation engine we built in. So here's a simple view that shows when a user is creating a custom team, they can specify their team name, the league that they want to participate in, and some of the players that they've chosen so far. So if we actually go back to the create teams button, we can actually show that live. So if we say a team name, as you can see, the suggest players column populates with some potential players you can choose immediately, kind of like the top K players that we've chosen in the throughout all the leagues so far. And as you click some players, you'll notice that some of the players have been added to the players column, and you're suggesting players based on positions that haven't already been fulfilled, other factors that we've factored in using a content-based filtering algorithm. We consider each player to have a vector of information like goals, assists, man of the match awards, pass percentage, assists. All of these factors that are considered in each player as a rating, and who would be a best viable candidate for the current team at hand. So as we click, you can see that players are being added, and some top K players are being suggested on the side. Here's another view that shows that once a user finishes creating a team, they can also go back and ask for recommendations on updating their team and making sure that their team is best fit at the time. So the team, as you can see, the team is currently in dire need of some keepers, and their current league is La Liga, and here's some potential players that would be a good fit for the team. So further improvements that we can go off of going from here would be to incorporate historical data into the match simulation. Currently, we're only taking into account player data and how players match up against other players, but we would really like to look at the historical data between two certain teams that we've picked and see what kind of matches and what kind of scores have evolved over time, and see if we can incorporate that feature in as well to better improve our predictive model. In addition, we really want to have real-time data updated so that we have season statistics can go into our data set. In addition, we can add further constraints in order to pick a team, like salary cap, age, amicability between players, so in order to increase the overall accuracy of our recommendation engine. And finally, we'd like to host our website somewhere so that everyone can access it. Thank you for listening.